everyone, thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about Microsoft DFS. As always, if you have a question, you can ask it in the chat window. You can email it to webcast@adminarsenal.com as well. If we use your question during the webcast, we'll send you some swag. So now I'll turn it over to Shane and Lex.
Hey everybody, I'm Shane.
And I'm Lex from Admin Arsenal.
All right, we're going to do PDQ deploy along with DFS. We do have a video out that Lex made. By we, I mean he. Lex made a video, I don't know, a year ago plus change, on setting up DFS using 2008 R2. Today we're going to be doing 2012 R2, and there have been some changes. So if you're using 2012 R2 and you're looking at the old video, you might run into some problems.
Yeah, so this is going to be a down and dirty, just so that we can get this installed so you can see replication. And then we're going to move our repository over and show you how PDQ deploy can use that.
All right, rock
So
on.
to start out, we're going to replicate folders. So let's go make a shared folder. So I'm going to make a folder on the C drive. We'll just call it packages. Maybe I will make a new folder. There we go. And then I'm going to share that. This should be pretty standard for most of you admins out there. Go to sharing. We're going to do advanced sharing. Share it. Obviously, we need to set some permissions. Now, you're going to want to set permissions for your own network.
Yeah, basically, it's, you know, what we're doing, like Lex mentioned, kind of down and dirty, but you know, take care with the permissions.
Agreed.
Or don't, man.
Yeah, make it available to everybody. All right, so I'm going to need to do that. So this is our main server, and then I've got site 1 over here. So this will be our replication server, and we are going to.
So the name of the server is site 1.
That is correct.
All right.
So I'm going to go over here and do the exact same thing. I'm going to make a folder called packages.
So we've got main and site 1 are the two computers, right?
That's correct.
All right.
And then I'm going to share this also.
So we're only going to be doing 2 servers that are going to be participating in DFS, but obviously you may and probably will have a lot more that participate.
All right, so now we have shared folders. Let's go back over to our main server and let's set up DFS. Now it's a server role. So from a server manager, we're going to go and add roles. And boy, that fits the screen well. So it's going to be role-based, and we're going to add some features, obviously.
Okay.
This is on main, so again, we're just going to click Next. Now to get DFS and DFS replication, you need to go down to File and Storage. And then we're going to add namespaces and the features that go with that.
All right.
And then DFS replication. From here, it's just a series of nexts and then an install. We will need to do the exact same thing over on site 1. So we're going to add the roles over here.
Okay.
Again, I'm going to center that a little bit so you can see it. Role-based. It's going to be on site 1. Back to our file and storage, file and iSCSI services, namespaces, add the features, and replication.
And your huge chest that's blocking out the next. Oh, there we go. Thanks. Thanks, you guys.
Hit install. So some things to think about, obviously, with DFS would be, making sure that permissions are set. Now, when you set those permissions, you need to make sure the credentials you're using in PDQ deploy have read-write access also to these shares.
Okay. And obviously, one of the biggest reasons people use DFS is that they have, different a wide area network or just different remote offices. So ideally, you'll want to have a DFS replicating server at each of your locations.
Yeah.
Now I know we're kind of ripping through this. We will be making this video available after this little presentation, and then you can go and look at it and hit pause and do your whole thing. So we are going to be ripping through this just for
there's a significant
time.
amount to cover today. So again, if you want to ask questions, they're in the chat window right over there. And all right, so eventually that's going to all be installed. Where you're going to go is you're going to go to Tools and then DFS Management.
Okay, and then we're on main again.
We are back on main, that's correct. Okay, so you'll notice here we have no namespaces and no replication set up. So we need to set up namespaces. What namespaces allows you to do, you can call a folder, universally from a name, and it will actually point.
Yeah, it's like having a shared. It's basically when you access a shared directory on a target on a server. The solution is now all of your users will reference the same share name, and it will just take them to the files that are stored on their local server.
There you go.
That's the whole point.
Thanks. So we're gonna add a namespace. Now the server we're gonna do this on obviously is main. Okay, and the namespace we're gonna call it packages, because
Well, it makes sense, since the point that we're doing this is to show you how you can kind of have a central repository for your PDQ deploy packages, so that you're not always having to traverse the WAN every time you want to deploy software.
Yeah. Now, after I put that in, I hit Edit Settings. Here, I'm going to go select that shared folder that we've already used, packages, and then obviously, again, set the permissions according to your network policies. Okay. And then I'm going to move on. Folder already exists. Yes, it does. We already built it. Let's roll with it. I think that's great. Let me just show you that again. You do want to enable Windows 2008 mode, just for legacy.
Yeah, well, if you have those older clients, the Windows 7,
I
the
guess
2008,
that is true.
If you're just completely 2012, you may want to not do that. Check the documentation.
There you go. So we've created our namespace. So now we can call that. Now I'll show you how to call that in just a minute, but let's create replication.
Obviously, not a trivial thing. You want replication, otherwise, the files, the packages are not going to be copied over to their respective DFS servers.
So again, we're going to be replicating the packages folder on our main server over to our Site1 server.
Okay.
All right, so this is going to be a multi-purpose replication group because we've got 2 or more servers we want in this. Okay, the name of our replication group, packages.
All right.
Make it easy so we can determine it, and it is in our domain.
Okay.
Okay, now I need to add the servers that are going to be involved here. Obviously, server main is going to be involved, and then I'm also going to add Site1 because these are the 2 servers we're going to replicate.
All right.
Now it's going to take a minute for Site1. It's going to go check to make sure the tools have actually been installed on Site1 so that it can be.
And the role has been placed and stuff like that.
That's correct. So it's a legitimate member of the replication group. So this should come online here pretty quick. There it is.
So they would add all of their servers that are going to
If you had
participate.
more servers, you'd add them here.
All right.
So this is going to be a full mesh. That means I can replicate. I can put files out on the main, or I can put files on Site1. Thank you, and they will replicate back and forth.
This is important. You'll do this you'll set this up based off of what your expectations are.
Now, if you want to throttle bandwidth, you can do it here. I'm not going to.
Okay.
And then we need to pick a primary member. Obviously, we want main to be our primary member of the replication group. So at this point now, I need to pick a path. What are we going to replicate? So we're going to replicate our packages folder that we've shared.
Okay.
And then we're going to give it an OK. I'm going to tell it next. Site1, it already knows we need to add a path on Site1, so we're going to go edit that. We're going to enable it, and we're going to go pick packages on Site1.
Okay.
Give it an OK. Hit next. There's the replication settings. Hit create. And there we go. We've created a replication group.
Okay.
So now at this point, 2 things. I'm going to reboot Site1 just because it will take less time for this to actually populate and pull the files and credentials and tokens.
So not strictly necessary, but for the sake of time, you're just going to
I'm
restart
going to
it.
reboot it, yeah. All right, so now I'm going to show you a couple of things. Let me show you this, right? So here's our folder that we shared packages. I'm going to make a folder here called main because I'm doing this on main so that we can watch this actually replicate. Now you'll see, here's the path, C packages main. This is how you're going to call the namespace. It's going to be your domain name, / and then
Packages.
thank you. And you'll see there it is. Now we can do that from, we'll end up doing that from Guinness, the machine that we're running the remote desktop on.
Okay.
And that will, you'll be able to call it from there.
Okay. Rock on.
So at this point,
So now we've got the replication set up. We're waiting for site one to pop up. Are we ready? Are we ready now to actually move our packages, our repository in PDQ deploy?
just about. Let me
Okay.
just show you the replication. Hey, JJ, I'm going to pull this up and log in. Give me a little blurred area there.
No one. Watch the edges blur.
Thanks, JJ. All right, so we're logged in. I'm just going to take you directly to the packages folder.
Okay. And then it should be. We should be seeing.
We should be seeing main replicating right here
Okay.
very shortly. We're also going to do this. I'm going to put a site one right here. And then that should replicate once it gets its credentials and tokens back over here to
Okay.
this. Now, we'll bounce back to that later. Let's talk about moving our repository.
Perfect. All right. So now, if you're doing this along with PDQ deploy, I'm going to open up. Now we're on the workstation Guinness.
Yeah.
By default, your repository. Now remember, your repository is where, any packages or install files that you download from the package library, they're stored in a repository, which by default is in the public users directory. Now we're gonna want to change that. So the reason why we're going to change that is, now we've got we got DFS set up, and we want to be able to deploy packages from the install files will live on DFS. So every time I deploy to a remote site, it's not having to push those install files over the WAN for every single target. We have our repository here. I'm actually going to show you a better way of getting there. Go to
Preferences.
Yep, and if you in preferences, you'll see a panel called
Repository.
Perfect. And we've already changed this one before, but you'll see probably your C users, public, etc. We want to change that. So what we're going to do.
This is where we call that namespace.
Yes.
That we just set up on replication.
But keep in mind, there's two steps that are involved here. There's changing this. So we're just going to go open this in Windows Explorer. You can do that actually. This is our repository. Okay. We want to take this repository, these files, and copy them out to our new DFS. So let's do this. Deadwood.local packages, right?
Yep.
Okay. And we're going to call this one, let's just do this. We'll call this repository. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Just to make it simple. And now I'm going to copy all these files and move them right over here. So this is a necessary step, because when you change the repository in PDQ deploy, it doesn't actually move the existing install files.
Yeah, now what'll happen is if you point that without moving the files, you're going to get a bunch of warning signs on all your packages saying, I don't know where the install files are.
And that's not necessarily a huge problem, but we'll take you there. Well, that's copying over. That's quite a bit to copy. We'll come back over here to PDQ deploy. And, let's just do a quick copy of this path, because this is going to be our new repository. It'll check to see if that exists. You saw that quick blurb there. I'm not sure if you saw that, but it does verify that exists. So now, yeah, you're going to start seeing some, if you haven't copied everything over, you're going to start seeing some warning signs over here saying, hey, some files can't be found. That gets taken care of with a refresh once this is all copied over.
Yep.
Not to worry.
And another thing, while that's copying, that is imperative that you do to make sure you get the advantage of using DFS is you need to change the type of deployments.
Yes.
They need to go from a push deployment to a pull deployment.
Yes, if you don't, that's known as the copy mode. We're going to go back into preferences. If you're going to be using DFS, or indeed if your repository is going to be stored on a file share somewhere, even without DFS, you really do want to have your default copy mode set to pull. And you'll do that here in performances. Now, we had already changed that. By default, it is set to push. You cannot have push if you have push. I'm sorry,
Free mode only has push. You've
No.
got to have Enterprise or Pro to be
Correct.
able to change that to a pull.
And if you go to pull and you don't have your repository called from a UNC, you're going to get an error. You're going to get a warning. So,
If it's located on your C drive, when you go to do the deployment, it's going to look on that local machine C drive, so it won't be looking in the right place.
and simply what pull does, when you deploy software using the pull copy mode, you send basically a list of all the install files that are needed to a target, and then that target goes out to the repository. That's why it needs to be a UNC, and it pulls those install files down locally and then does the installation. Whereas a push, it pushes everything from
The console.
the console, which would mean if my repository is on a UNC, the console would pull it down from the remote site or from the UNC path and then push it out. Very inefficient in this case.
Now, and the nice thing about DFS, if you're deploying across a wide area network, when you go and send the instructions, go pull these files from this namespace, the local server that you've been replicating is where they're going to go grab the files from.
Okay, good point. Now we're going to come out to the repository just to do a quick check. Now, notice we've got Google, there's Chrome. There we go. So there is a new Chrome that was released just before this podcast.
Yeah.
And we're gonna download it. And if everything is set up properly, this should be copied right here. So we're gonna go back here. Looks like we have some updated packages. We'll click that link. And sure enough, Google Chrome Enterprise 115. We're gonna import it. I'm gonna drink a beer.
Good on you, man. So this is going to take a minute to download. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free.
If you set full controls for everyone, will NFS permissions still apply?
NTFS. You are still.
I am so Linux.
You're so
some days.
Linux, dude.
Yeah.
It's what we call denial. Anyway, okay. So
Total
K Gasso
denial.
asks, if you set full permissions for everyone, will NTFS permissions still apply? The general rule when it comes to permissions is the most restrictive in Windows.
Yeah.
The most restrictive will apply. So, yeah, you can have your share permissions, but if you have extremely locked down file and directory permissions, generally speaking, the most restrictive will apply. So you're going to want to take care on both your file and print or your file and directory permissions as well as your share permissions. What Lex was setting were the share permissions. So yeah, everyone still though, I mean, it's still common practice if you, let's say on your file and directory permissions, if you had set perhaps domain users instead of everyone, do the same thing with your share permissions. Okay, because you don't necessarily want to fall back on that expectation. Just kind of stick with the best practices. We did everyone here just because it was
the down and dirty right now. Yeah.
It's fast. All right, so we've downloaded this. We should see, yep, there it is. So we do know that the new Chrome package that we just imported, it was downloaded into
The appropriate namespace.
All right, now I didn't see. Let's go ahead and check this out. So we still haven't. We might have some problems because I'm not seeing Site 1.
I'm not either.
And so I'm going to drive this back over to you. Maybe we can quickly troubleshoot. Go to Site 1 and see if there's any errors. Maybe we missed a step.
Oh, yeah, we did miss a step, actually. Now that you mention it. All right, where'd the mouse go?
First step we missed is over here. First step we missed is the mouse.
There we go. Okay, so back to the main server. And this is what I missed on this. Okay, let's go back to our DFS tools. We need to populate and allow, not populate, but we need to tell the namespacing that it can be published.
Ah.
So we go to properties.
It's like writing a book,
and
sending
then
it to the copy editor, but then never actually publishing
sending
it.
So enable that the access-based enumeration of the namespace, give it an OK. And now, these guys should be playing nice.
And maybe this is now where you would usually...
Yeah, I'd have to reboot the machine again.
Don't necessarily, once again, don't have to, but if you're trying to speed this up.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of settings for replication. You can kind of control how you want things replicated, how often.
It's a little bit deeper than the breadth of what we can cover in this right now.
We recommend that you, go out to Microsoft's site, pull up some best practices for DFS. Do you want to reboot that real quick so we can try to show this?
Let's do that.
Once again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot them out. And these can be questions related to DFS, PDQ deploy, Lex.
Shane, what kind of beer are you drinking today?
We're not going to cover that because it's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah, that's
I
exactly
just told Sean, grab me a beer, dude.
Dude, it's apricot beer.
It's
Who drinks
apricot beer. I don't trust Sean. JJ, I would trust to pour Guinness. I don't trust Sean to pour. You never trust the person who doesn't drink Guinness to pour Guinness.
To pour Guinness? Good point. So, do we have any other questions?
Did you bounce?
It's bouncing right now, man.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, hey, if let's go ahead and wait for a second.
Yeah.
Once again, if you have any questions, folks, we see that there's a lot of you out there. If you have any questions, by all means, throw down. Here's one. I've been working with DFS, DFSR since 2003. Have best practice training and documents. What email address do I send them to? Thank you, Brian. That was from Brian. Yeah, if you want, why don't you go ahead and send it out to, and thank you, and we'll make sure to put your name on this. Go out to webcast at adminarsenal.com. That's webcast at adminarsenal.com. And it'll be most likely Annalisa that will copy that out for you. All right, yeah, so we can see on site one, boy, that one little checkbox.
One checkbox.
Kind of made a difference.
All right, so here's site one. Again, I'm going to now, and you can see main behind it, I'm going to make that new folder. And we're going to call it site one just so you can see replication.
Yep, you already saw that new folder was created.
So there you go. If you see in the background right here, site one also built. The repository is being built. And again, it's just that simple checkbox of make sure you publish this, otherwise it can't play nice.
Yeah, and then, if there's another question, feel free once again.
Yeah.
Throw that down. All right, from tech support 417. That's
an interesting name.
It's got to be a fun birth certificate.
Yeah.
If I add a config file in a package, will that config file be copied at the next deployment? Let me think if I'm... You add a config file in a package. So if you add the file, it kind of depends. I'm going to go into PDQ deploy here. Perfect. Let's see if we've got. I'm going to go to. I think we probably have Firefox. Firefox is an example of this. So,
of a config file, yeah.
Yeah. If you look in Firefox, I'm copying a config file here. Copy mozilla.config. And you'll see that I'm copying from repository. So the answer to your question, tech support, 417 I believe, is if that config file is placed in, on your DFS namespace. If it is, like in this case, I put this config file in the repository. That way I know that I have confidence that wherever the repository is, this config file is going to exist. If I didn't, if I just put a regular UNC path to a different location for this config file, then no, it wouldn't necessarily be copied over. Yeah. So you add files, and once again, I'm pointing to the additional files here. If you add files to your packages, make sure that those files exist on a replicated folder. Yeah. Such as packages. I hope that answers the question. If it doesn't, by all means, throw down. Now, we had talked about setting the default pull method, the pull copy mode in preferences, performance, to the copy mode to pull. Does that mean that for every single package that you deploy that you have to have that? No.
You can set that at the package level.
Correct. This is a default. If you're going to have your repository set on a UNC, then this needs to be set to pull. But if I happen to have a PDQ deploy package that just has files stored locally, not in my repository, we'll just say, for example, type VNC. I could, if I wanted, to go to the package properties and change the copy mode from the default of pull to push, just so you know. So that is something that you can override the default at the package level. All right. If we don't have any more questions, it looks like we have one more.
Great.
I think Annalise is typing furiously.
Apricot beer.
If I wasn't scared of you, I'd beat the crap out of you. If I wasn't such a wuss, you'd be so dead right now.
If you could read what was going on in my mind, you'd be like, hey.
Be a whole thing going on.
Yeah.
Dave S. DFS will work across domains in a forest. That's our architecture. Do we need to do anything in particular for PDQ deploy to work with this? Permissions, credentials, etc. It's a very good question. So obviously, Dave, you've got DFS set up. When it comes to how PDQ deploy will work, it really comes down to two credentials, two sets of credentials. I'm going to go back here to PDQ deploy. Number one, in preferences.
Pop that up, JJ?
Yeah, in preferences, the background service. Now you notice these credentials that run the background service. The service is actually called PDQ deploy in your services manager. We refer to it as the background service. Quintana your background service credentials need to have change or write, read access to the namespace, and it's because it's the background service credentials that copy the files down to place them in the repository when they're imported, etc. And then you have your deploy credentials. Now, if you're going to be deploying, most people will just have the one set of credentials, but maybe you have a special set of credentials for your background service. And then you deploy stuff as Vincent, as you see here, or as Lex. Then those permissions will also need to be able to have access to at least read, preferably write, but read from the namespace.
Yeah.
Because the background service kind of handles it underneath the covers. But when you deploy this out to a target computer, and you deploy it as you run this as the deploy user, which is the default, that deploy user needs to be able to access that namespace from the target computer. But you know what? You brought up a good point that I want to cover, and that is this. Notice by default the run packages are deploy user here. We always recommend keeping this at the preferences level as deploy user. There are some cases, however, where you may need to have a local system set. Just keep in mind that if you have local system and your package has to reference anything on a network after the files are copied, you're going to fail.
You have some issues.
You're going to fail unless, which nobody does, unless you have all the computers in your domain set to read-write access of your DFS namespace.
And my suggestion on that is if you're going to use local, do it at the package level, not as a default.
Definitely. It's one of those, it will only be installed if I set this as local system. I found this out through troubleshooting for this particular application. Yeah. So that's hopefully that answers your question. You guys, we're going to go wrap it up. If it doesn't, if you have any other questions, throw down webcast@adminarsenal.com.
Yep.
I'm Shane.
And I'm Lex.
Rock on.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. If your question was featured during the webcast, if you'll send an email to webcast@adminarsenal.com, get in touch with you and get some swag sent out to you. And we'll see you next Thursday.